Good day, everyone. My name is Kirk Williams with KW3 Consulting. Thank you so much for attending today's webinar, The Power of Saying No. This is our third webinar in a series of webinars that we're doing all around project and program management. The first one we did was around managing project escalations, and the second one we did a couple weeks ago was all around improving our executive status reporting skill set. So today is all about the power of no. I think it's a great topic. I'll tell you a little bit how I came up with this topic. I think it's really relevant. I think all of us as PM, project program manager practitioners, and or maybe we're in the business line but we're doing some type of project management, have probably been faced at some point in time in our career with how to manage saying no or saying it's not possible to get this project over the deadline by a certain timeline and everything else. So hopefully today will be a great topic for all of us, as well as an engaging conversation as we kind of go through. Just to make sure, I want to make sure everyone can hear me. If everyone can kind of raise their hand if you can hear me, so make sure that we're good from an audio standpoint. Great, I think we are good. So let's get started here. So first one, let's make sure we're on the same page with what we are discussing today, and it really is the challenge. I read a recent report coming out of PMI, the Project Management Institute, around project management and the execution of strategic initiatives, and I was a little bit blown away by some of the stats that came through. So the first one, it said that only 9% of organizations successfully execute initiatives to deliver results, and I was like, wow, that kind of shocked me. And then when I looked at the next stat, it said consequently only 56% of strategic initiatives meet their goals and business intent. And in my mind, I question, why is this? Why is it that there's such the low percentages in regards to successful project implementations and delivering on the actual results? And I was at a recent PMI event here locally in Southern California, and there was a panel discussion where there's a CIO from one of the local companies, and he said, you know what? He told the group that everyone needs to think about this particular fact. We're all project program managers or have some type of capacity around that one. We're all trained, we're all skilled. So why is it that we have such a low percentage rate in getting projects fulfilled and getting them done, getting them executed, and getting them to achieve the results? And I think that really kind of shocked the audience and really kind of went, aha, let me think about that. So that really is the impetus for today's conversation, and really around the power of saying no. I mean, how many, as everyone thinks about this one in your own personal situation, how many times do we know when projects are going to fail? How many times have we been on projects, we know it's not going well, our gut tells us this, and we're looking at the status reports, talking to team members, the leads, and everything else, and we just don't have a good feeling. And then how honest are we with our senior leadership with the reality of the project and where it stands? I think that's really the big question. So I think really the challenge, to make sure we're on the same page for today, is that how do we say no when we need to and still make the right impact? And that really is the focus of today's conversation. So throughout today's conversation, we'll be talking about 4 to 5 key strategies around how to do this. And once again, this applies to any type of engagement, whether it be a business project, an IT engagement, strategy, operations, or a mixture of all of them together. I think the topic today really resonates across all type of projects. But a couple of housekeeping items first. So before we get started, want everyone to know that we are going to record the call, and we will send out the recording and make the presentation available for download after the conclusion of this call. During today's call, we will have 2 poll questions. Definitely want to hear from you and kind of get your thoughts as well. And then, as always, please, if you have questions throughout the conversation of the discussion today, please input your questions into the chat box anytime, and we'll pause and take those questions. And also, we are live on Twitter as we speak, hashtag Project Leadership. So feel free to tweet your comments throughout the call, your questions, comments. Once again, hashtag Project Leadership. And once again, as you have questions throughout today's call, feel free to put your questions in the chat box, and we will take those as we get them. Just a very quick background on myself. I've been with KW3 Consulting for the past 5 years. Part of that, I worked for Accenture Consulting. I've worked on and managed multi-million-dollar business and technology transformation initiatives. I've consulted with small, large companies, everywhere from Wells Fargo, Cisco, Callaway Golf, and some startups down in Orange County here in Southern California. For today's discussion, we will hit on a couple topics. So the first one is, we'll talk about why do projects fail? What is the impetus for that? What are we seeing on why this is the case? The second thing we'll talk through is, why aren't we saying no? We know that projects are in trouble. We don't have a good feeling. We look at our stats, our status, and talking to team members, and we don't have a good feel. So why aren't we saying no? The next point we'll talk about is, what are some key strategies for saying no? And then we'll go through a couple case studies, and then we'll wrap it up with some key takeaways, and definitely leave time at the end for any additional questions that you may have in addition to this topic as we kind of go through it. So the first one, let's first kind of start off and do a poll here. And I want to get your input on why do projects fail? So let me launch this, and you should see your poll come up. So if you take a moment and kind of take the poll and let me know, in your opinion, why do projects fail? Based on your experiences throughout your career on current projects or past projects. I'll give you about another 45 seconds to answer that. Okay, give it another 20 seconds. All right. So based on the poll and everyone's input here, what we have is the number one winner was the lack of planning. The second one was hard to decipher really between reality versus perception, and how do you kind of manage that one? And the close third, kind of a little bit of a tie, is that shiny objects are distracting, and that getting timely leadership decisions. So I think all of those are relevant, and it's funny, I think each project brings about its own unique skill set as far as individual challenges. So I think all those are relevant and all of them are applicable. You know, as we think from our experiences here at KW3 and kind of what we've seen, it really lies the gamut across all of this. The first one is really senior leadership expectations are less reasonable. As we may know, as I've experienced personally and also with KW3 and in previous life and everything else, is that, you know, senior leadership really has high expectations, and a lot of times overambitious, and they really have to deliver, you know, exceeding your results. So oftentimes that may translate down into the project per se, and how we deliver it. The lack of planning, and I saw from your guys' input, I totally agree with this. The lack of program and project planning is really key, and how do we take the time to really do the proper planning, and I call it kind of integrated planning, especially when you have a large engagement across multiple teams, you have internal, external dependencies. It really can cause some challenges if it's not done right up front. In addition, you know, hard, as you guys mentioned, hard to decipher between reality and perception. You know, to me, this really kind of comes down to our gut feeling. We know that when we are managing an initiative or a project, we know when stuff feels right, or we get some uncomfortable feelings within our gut that, something's not right. And a lot of times that's a perception, but how do we kind of translate that into reality and kind of get that more fact basis? So that tends to be a challenge. As you guys also mentioned, the lack of critical decision making, a lot of times this comes from leadership and making sure that you have the right platform and the right time with leadership to get their buy-in, as well as to make those critical decision making opportunities. And the fifth one I want to talk about here is really too focused on managing the Gantt chart versus seeing forest for the trees. And what I mean here is that I know from my personal experiences back early on in my career and working with several clients, oftentimes there are those PMs that really kind of focusing on kind of managing the timeline, managing the Gantt chart day by day and everything else. But really, to deliver a successful engagement, it takes that, plus it takes another set of, I call it, soft skills or fact-based skills to really pull a project off. And it's this whole kind of EQ, emotional intelligence piece that is just as critical as actually doing the work to really get an overall initiative across the finish line and get it completed. And the last one, from what we've seen a lot through our experiences, is that shiny objects can really be distracting. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that, what I've seen a lot of times with my clients and through personal experiences earlier on in my career is that oftentimes you kind of we'll see our senior executives, our senior leaders say, hey, if you get this project done on time, go to the finish line, you know what, I'll give you a bonus, or I'll give you a promotion this, I'll give you this, and I'll give you that. And to kind of incent us to get the job done even further. But what I've learned is that these types of shiny objects can be distracting and really kind of take our eye off the goal. Where I've seen situations where individuals, PMs, project and program managers, they're more focused on trying to go to the finish line rather than trying to do what's right for the project and really trying to deliver a successful solution. So shiny objects can be distracting. In some senses, they may be needed, but I think it's all about leading with the right intent to get the job done and with the right quality. And sometimes that means breaking the norm and not being the most popular person. And that means giving the bad news or giving alternatives, which a lot of times executives don't want to hear. But that comes with the territory and kind of being a senior PM, senior program manager per se. So the next one topic I want to catch on is, why aren't we saying no? And here are several reasons that we've seen through our experiences, whether personal or with client experiences. Job security. I mean, times, honestly, let's put it out there, right? We all kind of worry about our jobs and having security, so we don't want to rock the boat. We have this fear of kind of going against the norm. Another instance, maybe we don't have all the facts. So how can we kind of call it or wave the white flag if we don't have all the facts? Another reason could be that we're concerned more about our reputation and the negative consequences of saying no or saying we're in trouble and what that may mean. And the last one we talked about really is distracted by the shiny objects, which we talked about, which goes a lot to the incentives that sometimes our bosses will put in front of us to make sure that we do the job, but sometimes we get distracted by the shiny objects rather than doing the right thing for the engagement to make sure that we actually deliver a very successful project. So for today's discussion, we're going to talk about the strategies for saying no. And the key thing I want to say is it's a balancing act. There is no perfect formula. It's managing multiple different pieces. And, let's face it, if we as project and program managers, if we went to our bosses and says, nope, we can't do it, we're not going to do it, they'll probably walk us out the door. So that's not a viable option. So what I'm saying here is not that we just say no and that's it. What I'm saying is that there are ways to saying no and still getting your point across and still being held in high regard and doing the right thing by the engagement, so you do deliver the results that are required. When we look at the strategies for saying no, there are really two paradigms that go hand in hand together that require balance. First is instinct. So with instinct, that's our gut feeling, and it really comes down to two things. One, it's being confident. It's being confident to call a red flag, wave a red flag. We need to, even if it's against the norm. And two is kind of following your gut feeling. I mean, we all have that kind of inner barometer that we have to gauge, and it's knowing your instincts and knowing when things are green, when things are yellow, and being able to kind of decide through that. And then on the other side, we have this whole thing around soft skills and really kind of getting to the fact. And with the soft skills, a couple areas kind of come up there. One is it's really building rapport with senior leaders. So how can you say no, or saying, no, it's not possible, but here's some alternatives, if we as project and program managers don't have the rapport with the senior leaders such that they'll hear us. Second thing around soft skills and facts is we have to lead with the facts. So we have to lead with the tools, the processes that gives the executives exactly what they want, how they want to see it, so it gives them in their eyes so they can digest it on their terms. And the last one is really using trade-off scenarios as an option. You just can't say no, it's not going to work. If you say no, it's not going to work, but you know what? Here's some other options that we can look at. Maybe still get to the same endpoint, but we're going to do it in a slightly different way. And that's what we call trade-off scenarios. So what I'd like to do now is kind of go through this and kind of take each one of these areas and kind of do a double click on them and kind of talk through that. And once again, as we go through, if you have questions, please raise your hand, and we will take those questions real time. So the first one on the instinct side is really being confident. This is all about the ability and having the confidence to say no, it's not going to happen, or no, we're having challenges, and this is why, and this is what we have to do differently. It's really having that confidence. I know earlier on in my career, probably coming right out of college, I had less of that confidence, so I had to build that. But as you progress toward that project to program manager level, it's really having the confidence to say no. Because let's face it, senior leaders, from our previous webinars that I've had previously, the past two, we've talked about the whole DISC profile and understanding the type of leaders that you work for or that you're under that require the status. And face it, in general, with the C-suite or the senior leaders that we work with, they tend to be the A-type personalities, right? They're driving, they're ambitious, they want results, they want it when they want it, and they expect the team to kind of drive toward that. And in some instances, it can be a little intimidating to tell that type of A-type personality that their problems, or we need to course correct, we need to go here, we need to go there. So it's really about having the ability to say no with confidence. And what makes that easier is really kind of building the rapport and trust with your senior leaders if they feel as though your primary objective is really the success of the project and really getting it done on time and getting it over the finish line, then the ability to say no with options and everything else makes it a lot easier. The next one the next one on the instinct is really follow your gut. As I mentioned before on the overview slide, this is all about our internal barometer. And for me, what I've learned is that over the years, my internal barometer has got a lot more keener as just through my experiences and multiple projects, being on tough projects, easy projects, sitting in front of the CEO and getting yelled at and everything else, right? Through all of that, we've all kind of built up this internal barometer based on all of our experiences. And what we have to do is listen to it. We have to follow it. Now, we may not have all the right answers at that current time, but we know in our gut something doesn't feel right, so we need to investigate more to making sure that we figure out what that question mark is and make sure we get it justified, get the facts, and figure out what the implications are. My motto, like I told, when I worked in my previous company and had counselees, If it doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. So you got to figure out why it's not right and what's the plan to kind of get that back on track. And following your gut, a lot of times this is really showing leadership, and a lot of times this could be breaking the norm to get your point across. So kind of breaking the pact, or not being the nice person, not being the nice PM, but really putting the right data and sharing the bad news to make sure that the project gets delivered the way it needs to. And once again, as mentioned before, not getting blindsided by shiny objects. They're nice, they're pretty, they can be they can be incentivizing, a bonus this, a bonus that, and everything else, right? But sometimes we get blindsided and we lose track of really what our mission is, and really on delivering the type of projects and delivering the right news that's required to get the project across the line. Moving on to that next category on the right-hand side, was really around building soft skills and the facts. So with the first one on there is really building rapport with senior leaders. As I said before, how can you say no, it's not possible, we need to come up with some other ways, if we don't have the rapport and the eyes and the ears of senior leadership that they will listen to us? So with any engagement, you have to build great rapport with your senior leadership, really to develop that trust. Because most likely, how many times have major projects, complex projects, gone perfectly? Probably most times not, because if they're easy, it'd be no big deal. So a lot of times with these complex initiatives, we know we're going to have tough conversations. So you have to build the platform, you have to build the base, you got to build these relationships with the senior leaders, so when it comes time for the tough conversations, they're willing to listen, they're willing to take it all in and digest it. And a part of building the rapport with them is that you have to understand what's important to them. I remember an engagement for a major banking company, and there were 4 or 5 different leaders from an EVP level that were running the project, and they all had something vastly different that was important to them. So when we presented status to them, it was like getting 5 or 6 different reactions, because they were all coming from different vantage points, and we didn't take the time to understand each stakeholder. Why do they care? Why are they here? What's important to them? And how do they want to see it? Because ultimately, in the day, if senior leaders feel heard, understand, and they know that you get them, it makes it for a much easier conversation and a much better relationship, especially when it comes to tough conversations. One of the techniques that we use for building rapport with senior leaders is called the stakeholder commitment process. At a high level, this is basically what we do on every engagement. We will develop a list of 4 to 5 questions for the senior leaders. What's your role in the project? What's important to you in this project? How do you define success? What is your biggest concerns at this point? And another question may be, how do you want to receive status escalations and everything else? And really kind of trying to get the boilerplate around their current disposition and where they're at. And out of these interviews, you take those 5 or 6 questions and we interview these senior leaders. And what we do is we plot their responses and really get to a clear understanding of where each executive is from a current disposition and buy-in standpoint. So if you look at this, if you look at this chart, what you'll see is up top, a dark blue line, solid line, and this represents those folks that are on the commitment ownership path. If you look down here on the blue dotted line, these represent those executives or senior leaders that are in opposition of what's going on. And the beauty and the power of this is that when you get through interviewing all of your major stakeholders and all your executives that have a vested interest in this, you'll see where they plot on this graph. The ideal state is for all of your senior leaders to be in this A category. You want them to be on the highest most curve up top of the commitment and ownership. And if you have folks that are down like the EFG and the understanding and acceptance areas, or you have folks like this one, this executive down in the D area, you know that there's work that needs to be done to get them to move up, either to get them off this dotted line or to get them to move up into where this executive A is currently at. So it's a novelty. It's a important tool that can help you as a project and senior program manager to help manage, as I call it, the emotional intelligence of your senior leaders to know exactly where you're at. So when you go in for the executive status meetings and everything else, you have a pretty good disposition of where everyone's at. And then two, those executives will feel like you've heard them and you're starting to understand them. For those executives that are not in this upper quadrant in the A, as I mentioned, you know that means that you have work to do. There are a series of actions that you have to take to get the executive E, F, G, B, C, and D up into this upper quadrant next to executive A. And that goes down into our stakeholder commitment process template. And what we do for every engagement is, as we plot those executives, once again, for those executives that are not with executive A in the upper quadrant, we know that we have a series of action items that we have to do. So what we'll do is we'll get a one-pager and we'll document our conversation, kind of the background from our conversations with each stakeholder. And then for each stakeholder, we will come up with a set action plan of what we need to do to get those executives to that strong commitment ownership curve where executive A is. And this really kind of serves as your emotional intelligence cheat sheet. And you know how you need to communicate with certain executives because some think this way, some think this way, someone that way, someone has a current disposition this way. So it gives you a framework to know how to kind of walk into these conversations so you can be most effective and most effective. The next area, a part of soft skills and facts, is really leading. Soft skills is really leading with the facts. As I mentioned before, when you have these conversations with senior leaders, they want to feel like they are being heard, understood, and they're getting exactly what they want. So when it comes to leading with the facts, to me, this all comes down to executive status reporting, which we dived in deeper on our last call. But it's really about beginning with it in the mind, knowing what the leadership wants, how they want to see it, and really talking in their terms that they understand. If it's an IT project and you're building a data warehouse and you're talking about API 1, API 2, API 3, well, the senior executives may not get that because they're coming from a business mindset. So how do you translate the work, the detailed work that the team is doing and put that in terms that executives understand and can grasp and to truly know where things are at, and they can easily identify the issues and risks and really know where they stand and what decisions they need to make it. And also when leading the facts, you got to be consistent. So when you come up with your stats reporting view and your tools and your templates, you have to make sure it resonates, consistent, because the more they see the same thing, it's going to make your lives a lot easier in leading with the facts. And then when you have those tough conversations, it makes it much, much easier to have. One thing that we do with every engagement is really put together a set of executive status dashboards. And what we do is we work with the executives, whether it be separate conversations or maybe as part of the stakeholder commitment conversations. We will, based on our understanding of the initiative that we are managing, the end result from a business standpoint, technology standpoint, people standpoint, we come up with a draft executive dashboard. And what we do is we sit down with the executives and say, hey, this is the dashboard that we want to communicate status for this initiative. Does this resonate? Does this work? And we may go through a couple of round iterations, 2, 3, 4 iterations before we get to the right template. But the work that we do up front saves us a lot more time than the back end, rather than kind of being in fire drill mode or reactive mode. And when executives say, oh, we're not getting the right status, I don't get it, give me this view, that view, this, and that, it helps to eliminate a lot of that and get the right view up front, get buy-in, get the rapport from senior leaders, and then it makes it a lot more easier, especially when it's time to have those tough conversations and saying, hey, here's where we're at. You know what? Overall status is red. Here are the two areas that are causing us problems. It's data mapping, it's requirements, and here's what we need to do about it, right? It makes it a lot more easier. So this template is something that we use for a recent engagement that we did for a regional bank here in Southern California for a data warehouse project. And we actually had two slides. We had two dashboards. This is the first dashboard from an overall status standpoint. So up top, we have the overall status, and we have the various parts of the project from an SLDC cycle standpoint, so requirements, design, build, test. And then as the project went on and each of these phases got started, we would code them, and you see the color code at the bottom. Blue is complete, green, yellow, red for your current status and everything else. And then they can easily know where they need to focus on. And then we had our key summary status points, and then we really talked about our key issues and risks and where we were at from that standpoint. The second dashboard that we put together is really around a much more deeper dashboard, but at the very much the highest level, to kind of show here are the end deliverables that we are coming up with. So for this initiative, for this particular dashboard that we use for a regional bank here in Southern California, it was a business intelligence project. So there were 12 or 15 different data sources that we were kind of mining into this data warehouse. So we used the data source as our key deliverable and wanted to articulate to the senior executive team where we were in the requirements process, the sign-off process from the various leaders, the CEO, the presidents, the sponsors, the IT steering committee, and everything else. And ultimately, at the end, what we want to see is that as you kind of move from left to right, this chart should be becoming blue as you go. And if there's red or yellow, the executive knows that's where they need to pinpoint and really kind of zoom in on, and ask the questions. And those may be areas where you need to say no, or you need help, etc. So it really kind of helps to articulate the right story and keep the executives aligned. One, to build a rapport, consistent status view, and to make it easier so when it comes time for those tough conversations, it makes it a lot easier. The last area of the soft skills and facts is really around using trade-off scenarios. You know, like I mentioned before, oftentimes a lot of these complex initiatives are tough, right? That's why we're doing it. And they rarely, most of the time, go perfectly. So we already know that there are going to be those things, those challenges that come up. And, you know, with every project, there may be an impact to resources, timeline, or budget. And if there's impact to any one of those, you know, as a senior project manager or senior program manager, through our leading with facts, we have to, instead of just saying no, we have to present options to the executive team to say, hey, we know we have these issues. It has this impact, whether it be a budget or a timeline or resources, and here are the options that we've come up with. So it makes it easier than just saying, no, we have challenges, but you know what? We got challenges, and we're not going to hit this timeline of December 31st, but we have some options here where, you know what? Maybe all the scope items 1 through 20 we can't hit by December 31st, but you know what? For December 31st, we can get through scope items 1 through 10, and then, you know, by February 15th next year, we can get through scope items 11 through 20. And it just creates a different conversation to have with the senior leadership team, and it kind of helps you build a rapport. It builds the reputation, the leadership, and really helps with consensus building with the senior leaders. And what you see here is a template that we often use. There are two templates as it relates to using the trade-off scenarios process. The first one is we normally come up with at least 3 options when it comes time that we know we're not going to hit a date, or we have problem resources or budget, whatever it is, how we're going to fix it. So we come up with 3 options. And with each option, we normally will fill out a matrix just like this. Option 1, option 2, option 2. If there's a revised delivery date, what are the pros and cons with each one of these options? Are there any dependencies that the executives need to know about? And then what's our recommendation at the very highest level? And this has worked very, 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 very well for us, especially, once again, on these complex initiatives. It rarely goes perfect. and we know that, right? But coming to the table and not just saying no, but coming saying, you know what, we may not make it or we're not going to make it, but here's some options. And, and these are never easy conversations, but as, senior project managers and program managers, these are definitely conversations that we need to have in a much more structured fashion as we manage these complex initiatives. The next template, so on the previous page, remember as I mentioned, we had 3 options, 1, 2, and 3. Then what we normally do is take each one of those options and we will add a page for each option and blow it out into more detail, where if we have an adjustment to scope, we will kind of talk about those areas here, what was in current scope. Maybe here's some additional scope that we need to add in for whatever reason. We'll talk about the resources and how the resource plan, if that's changed at all, if it has. Do we need more resources, less resources, or are there issues? And then also at the bottom, we'll lead it with an overall timeline standpoint and kind of show updated timeline on where we're going to be. And also up here, we indicate where we have dependencies, whether it be internal or external dependencies to get the project done. So it's crystal clear that to pull this off from an option 3 standpoint, here's a timeline, but to make this happen, we have several dependencies that we need to get done, that we need to have delivered so we can get the project across the finish line. So really, the trade-off option template is it's visually appealing to senior executives, simple, straight to the point. It talks about the resource implications, the proposed timeline, and any scope adjustments that there are. So overall, when we talk about, take a step back here, we just went through quite a bit. Just want kind of to re-summarize what we had talked about from the strategies for saying no. It's a balancing act. 2 areas that we need to balance is instinct and soft skills and facts. So from an instinct standpoint, it's about being confident, following your gut, and just following that internal barometer. The second part is really around the soft skills and the facts. It's building the rapport with senior leaders, building that stakeholder commitment, understanding where the disposition of each senior leader is at so you know how to communicate more effectively. Is leading with facts, is having that consistent status view so that when you have the tough conversations, it makes it a lot easier. And then when you have tough conversations and you know a deadline is not going to be met, you use trade-off scenarios or options that are well thought out that helps you have a better conversation with the executives where you're not just saying no, you're saying no, but here are some options to consider, and let's talk through those. So it's much more of a more structured and well thought out conversation that you can have with the executives. So now, based on what we just talked about, let's go to our next poll. Pull it up here, and I really want to get your input on, based on what we've talked about and some of the key strategies from an instinct and the soft skills and facts, what strategy or strategies do you think is most helpful for the current situation that you're in? So I'm about to launch the poll. So please take a minute to kind of input. Just want to see kind of what your current thoughts are and kind of see which ones kind of resonate the most for you guys. Give you another 20, 30 seconds. All right. So it seems like what's resonated the most is building the rapport with senior leaders, leading with facts, and really using the trade-off scenarios. So really it seems like you guys are really, based on the situation, really kind of gravitated toward the soft skills and the facts part of the balancing act, which is good to know. So hopefully a lot of the strategies that we've talked about, you can take some of those kind of going into your current situation and really leverage those prudently to help make your project or your initiative more effective. What I wanted to do now, any questions? Make sure I didn't miss anything. Any questions, point? No questions? Great. Okay. What I want to do at this point is really walk you through two case studies. And one is a personal case study prior with a consulting firm, a personal experience prior to my Academy 3 experience. And my second one is something that we did recently with a client. So I want to give you two case studies as relates to saying no. The first one will be about where we didn't say no. And the second case study is where we did say no and seeing what the end result and how different it was. So with the first case study, it was a prior to Academy 3 with my previous firm. We were brought in. The client was a national banking institution that we all know, and they were leading a multi-year cross-line of business and technology transformation project. And basically, they have 4 business lines across their consumer lending, and they were trying to streamline all the processes and technologies across all the 4 business lines to reduce costs, better customer experience, and everything else. Well, the client had been at this for about 2 years, and they had spent probably about $100 million just in the past 2 years, and they had minimal results to show. So they brought in the consult team, I was part of that, to really get the project back on track. And so in doing that, let me kind of set it up. This project, once I mentioned $100 million, there were probably over 500 people on the engagement, full-time, part-time, vendors, contractors, technology companies, software vendors. I mean, it was a massive project undertaking. 500 people, you probably had 20, 25 different teams, everything from probably 10 different development teams, architecture teams, business requirements teams. You had 3 business lines that are involved. Everybody wanted their own say in it. Really, really complex. So they had done an RFP to get another consulting firm to come in and really kind of get the project back on track. And we had won the work, and we came in, we did a PM assessment, a SWOT analysis to kind of get everything on the same page, get to this one consistent status reporting view, lead with the facts. I mean, across all of this in 2 years, they really didn't have any type of executive level status reporting that they can truly see where they're at. It was all, they had 25 different status reports, and they were going through each status report and nothing to kind of bring it together cohesively. And coming in, they said, well, we need to get the project back on track. I think our fault here was that we said what they wanted to hear, and we did just keep the project moving. And thinking about it, just thinking about all the complexity I just talked about, the 500 people, different teams, different personas, everyone had different, excuse me, everyone had a different point of view on where the product was at, different ideas and everything else. In retrospect, what we should have said is, well, you know what, let's stop the project, let's put it on hold, let's re-baseline where we're at, and then rejigger the schedule and timeline and really rethink about it. Versus what we did being in the project for a year was trying to embed new processes in a project that was going 100 miles per hour, and it made it that much tougher. And the executives, to my point around the stakeholder commitment, none of the executives, there were 4 main executives, all EVPs, business lines, all want their own thing, and they weren't aligned together. So we were pushing change, pushing changes, pushing process and everything else, pushing new PM tools, new PM processes, executive status reporting, and we never had the soft skills, all of the emotional intelligence, all of the stakeholder commitment stuff, all on the same page to make it all go together. And ultimately, what happened, the project basically imploded, right? The project slowly just began to cripple more and more and more, and eventually the project was put on hold, it was downsized, and they kind of basically scrapped the whole thing, and now are just kind of doing bits and pieces incrementally here, one there, one there. So when I think about all the experiences, particularly with this one, lesson learned, back before my Academy 3 days is for this project, if I had to do a do-over, I had the power to do that, I would have done it differently and followed what we just talked about and say, you know what, the power to say no, let's pause it, let's get everyone lined together, let's talk about the stakeholder commitment, let's understand where all the teams are at, understand where the challenges are, really reshape the project so it's successful rather than just coming in and trying to push a sinking ship. And still, the results weren't delivered. So I think this is a great case study, definitely lesson learned earlier on in my career. And no, great. I hope you guys took something from that. Now, if we look at the second case study, this was a recent KW3 experience with a regional bank here in Southern California. And we were working, as I mentioned before, you saw some other status reporting tools. We were working on a status report, on a business intelligence project for the CFO. So this regional bank has gone through a number of acquisitions of acquiring smaller banks and other banks. And as a result, as you might imagine, there were different disparate systems and processes, but the CFO still need to pull together all of the company's financial reporting, the 10K, 10Q, but it made it much more challenging because there were so many different systems, data sources coming in. Some were external, some were internal. It was just a massive feat. It took the CFO team anywhere from 30 to 45 days really just to combine and consolidate the data and make any sense out of it, which was definitely just too much of a long timeline. So with this project, the CEO wanted us to get this done. As I mentioned before, he was a very much type A personality, very bullish, didn't like the word no. He wanted to get it done. And he was aggressive, ambitious, and he didn't want to hear anything else. And he would definitely take you to the floor if he thought you were BSing him. Yeah, it was definitely an interesting experience. And he also put the shiny object in front of us to incent us that if we deliver this, then we get a $50,000 bonus if we deliver this. So once again, he put the shiny object out there to get us there and everything else. The challenges we face is that it was a tight deadline. They had an internal person that was leading the project on our day, and the new person had been with the bank about 2 months. Day 2 of the project, of us being on it, that internal resource was fired by the CEO because he did not deliver. So we were on hook to deliver the rest of the project. So being that 2 months were already lost by the previous person, the CEO still wanted the project delivered on time. So from the get-go, we had a very, very frank conversation with the CEO and say, hey, it's a push. Here is the tight timeline. To get to this, everything has to go perfect. Here are dependencies. As these dependencies slip, or if we have challenges fulfilling those dependencies, or those dependencies getting fulfilled, we knew that there may be impact to schedule. So we had a very upfront conversation with the CEO, CFO, and all the executives from a stakeholder commitment standpoint, understanding what was important to them and why they need this project done, and that we were going to be fully transparent and ask them how they really wanted to see status and how they wanted to be informed. And once again, the CEO was one of those aggressive types. I mean, he could blow a gasket at any point if he felt there was slippage or we weren't making progress. And so we really started up front with a stakeholder commitment and making sure that we were all on the same page, getting the buy-in, getting the rapport. We had come up with the executive status reporting template, the one I showed you, and got buy-in from the CEO and the CFO that this is what they wanted to see on a weekly basis. And then we also got an understanding from the CEO and the CFO how they wanted to be informed of escalations or issues. And from their standpoint, they wanted it real time. I mean, basically, I personally talked to the CEO almost every night around midnight because that's when he would get around to his email if there were issues, and he wanted to know what was going on and what he needed to do to really clear the hurdles. So as you can see, between this case study and the last case study, vastly different, right? It's a totally different approach, where the first case study, we kind of walked in and we just jumped in and kind of went along with the flow without challenging the norm where we should have and done some things differently. Here, kind of thrown in, but we paused for a second, did the stakeholder commitment, did the buy-in, did the understanding what's important, understand from our standpoint how we're going to do it and make sure they knew it from a transparency, how they want to see status, how they want to do escalation, such that it became less of an issue down the road, but more of let's just talk about what we got to do to clear some of these hurdles, right? So very different approach. Lessons learned, like I mentioned before, we did the right thing, and we said no up front, and we said no throughout, and as we went through the project, some of those dependencies did slip. And as those dependencies slipped, the schedule slipped as well. So as you can imagine, with a high A personality CEO, that's never an easy conversation, but we had the conversation, and we had that consistent status view such that from day one, every day as we reported status, we knew that there were dependencies, and we made it very clear, as these dependencies don't happen, we knew if dependency A doesn't happen, we knew that the project may be at risk. So we did the right thing up front, saying no, and as we went through it, as we ran into issues and stuff wasn't being done, impact timeline, we made it a known issue. Through our stakeholder commitment, through our status reporting, we built the trust with the senior leadership that we were getting them honest and transparent status. There's no hiding anything. It just is what it is. And we always led with the facts. So we always had that consistent status view that they saw every week, and the CEO got used to that, and he used to flip the pages and want to say, okay, where's the yellow and red? What do I have to be worried about? And he would ask himself, if it's red, how do we turn it from red to green, and what do you need from me? Who do I need to go make calls to, go in their office to make sure this happens? And then also, the last part, we used trade-off scenarios. So we knew that as we went through the project, certain dependencies weren't fulfilled, our timelines were impacted, and we created trade-off scenarios saying, hey, we knew this wasn't going to happen. Here's some terms. Here, we know we can't make the date. That's a no. But here are some alternative options that we've thought about to make it happen. And it made, I was expecting the CEO to blow a gasket, but he actually sat there, he looked at it, and he goes, well thought out, let's do option 3. Come back to me with pricing, and then we'll go from there. So as you can see, totally different conversation, totally different approach between case study 2 and case study 1. But I hope you see that with case study 2, the power to say no, using the right tools from an instinct and a soft skills and leading with the facts makes a big difference in an approach standpoint. So I hope you find those two case studies helpful and insightful, and hopefully some synergies to kind of what you're doing today. From a key takeaway standpoint, I think today has been a great discussion. Hopefully you found it engaging. Hopefully you're able to take some key bits and key tidbits that you can use back in your own personal situation. Key takeaways to keep in mind, be confident. Sometimes you have to go against the norm, but that's okay. But in building yourself as a leader and leadership, that's required. 2, follow your gut instinct. For me, my internal barometer is always my first gauge, and 9 times out of 10 is normally right. 3, instead of saying, no, can't do it, use trade-off scenarios. Great option to show a well-thought-out process, and as a senior project manager and a senior PM, it goes over very well from a leadership standpoint. Keep your leaders engaged. Take time to do your stakeholder commitment process. Understand what's important to each leader, why do they care, what are the issues, how they define success, and how do they want to see status. Make time for that. If you do that, you'll keep them engaged all throughout. They'll feel heard, they'll feel understood, and it'll make it much easier to having those no conversations and talking about the alternatives. And the last point, always lead with the facts. As you guys said, this was kind of one of the most important areas that you guys thought was most helpful to you. Lead with the facts. Get that consistent status reporting view that you can share with the executive on an ongoing basis, and so they're much more easily to see where the problem areas are, and so they can make those decisions that they need to keep the project going. And that's it. Any questions at this point in time? As we go through, if you have any questions, please feel free to kind of put up there. Just one note, next Friday, KW3, we are having a workshop here in Los Angeles all around improving executive level status reporting. This was the topic of our last webinar, but actually we're doing a deeper dive next Friday from 8:30 to 12 p.m. It's going to be a great engaging discussion, a lot of working session and mind and knowledge sharing among all of us around how to deliver more effective status reporting to our senior leaders, to our key stakeholders. So it should be a very, very impactful workshop. If you're interested, please email info@kw3consulting.com, or you can check out our website. Go under the events section, and you'll find more details and where to register about that one. But it should be a very, very great workshop for a half day. Our next webinar will be Thursday, January 29th. We are going to do this workshop in conjunction with two of our strategic alliance partners, and the topic will be innovation, moving from strategy to execution. So stay tuned for more details. Media invites will be going out for that later, probably early January after the holidays. Once again, thank you so much for joining us today. Hope you found it insightful. You will receive a survey after this call via email, or may come up in the chat window. And also, please feel free to follow us on social media. Our website is kw3consulting.com, and we're also on LinkedIn and Twitter. So once again, thank you so much for joining. Hope you found it insightful, and have a great day.